This is implementing abstract transactions. My name is Chris Lee and my student number is S2248-17878. This is the final iteration of our banking application before we move on to documentation. So we have a number of different changes that I'll cover in this video. Perhaps the largest one is we've now declared transaction as an abstract class. Now, the idea here is that it's still going to function as a base or a template rather for our derived classes. So transaction, deposit transaction, withdrawal transaction, and transfer transaction are still going to inherit from that. That's fine. The approach for this, at least anyway, is when we still want a sort of a base for inheritance or polymorphism purposes, but it doesn't make a great deal of sense to instantiate the class itself. So in other words, we know that our bank is going to be using transactions, but all of those transactions are going to be of some type. They'll either be depositing, withdrawing, or transferring money. So we will no longer be able to create an instance object of the transaction class, and every sort of object that we're creating are going to be of the specific derived classes. Throughout the program, though, we still have some methods and stuff like that defined like this, where the parameter that is expecting is a transaction object. Because the deposit, transfer, and withdraw are children, they're derived classes, we will be able to still pass those in there. That'll be fine. For our specific example, we're going to deposit some money today and we're going to roll a transaction back. So we will pass in a deposit transaction object and that will be all sweet. And then finally, just before we begin as well, if we were to come down to the main class, just to demonstrate how the abstract transaction sort of works. If we were to come down here and try to create an instance object of the transaction class, we'll no longer be able to do that. But in any event, we will begin the program with function F11. In terms of other changes as well, something that I sort of forgot to cover as well is that we are now storing all transaction objects in the transactions list rather. So depositing money, withdrawing money, and transferring money will all register and we'll be able to see those in the list, but we'll move through the program and you can see that for yourself. Now, some of the functionality we've covered several times, so I'm going to skip through a bunch of it. But we'll begin by adding an account. So that is the do account method. It comes up here and it prompts for a name. And then we're going to give an amount to set the initial balance of the account. And we'll give it to 200. Now we're going to add the account to the accounts list. So if we move down here into our watch list now, we can see that our accounts list now has one object in it. The 0th element, so it's the very first one, is Chris, and it has a balance of 200, so that's all functioning fine. The next thing that we'll do is move on to depositing money into that account. Now, I believe I have sort of covered this before. So for this method to work, we will need to provide a name. We'll need to search that, make sure that the name matches an account that exists. It does. We're using for each again. So just as a recap, this is where we do not care about the values that we're iterating through. So we just want to loop through them. We don't want to modify them or anything like that, I should say. We return that account object. Now we're going to provide an amount to deposit. We will provide 25. Again, these are down here at least success, executed, and reversed. These are a sort of Boolean values that we're using as indicators to track what's going on with a specific transaction. They're set to false initially. The deposit transaction is inheriting from the base, which is transaction. That's our abstract class now. So we're checking if the transaction has been executed yet. So have we already done this? We have not, so that's fine. We can move on. We set executed to true to say that we are doing the transaction now. We get a date and timestamp so that we know when the transaction occurred. And then now we move on to actually interacting with the balance field, or the amount field rather, and changing that. So we're summing the amount that we've provided, which was 25, to the existing balance. And we set success to true. So now that transaction has occurred, that's fine. If we keep an eye on the balance field down here, this will soon update as we move through. And then we have it has moved through there. Now, we have our first transaction listed there. So if we were to check our list of transactions, our 0th transaction, so the very first one, has a date and timestamp. It's been executed, so we have done it. It hasn't been reversed yet, so that's still false, and it was successful. The amount that we passed in is there. Now we'll move back to the main menu, and we will look at the transaction history, and we'll look at rolling back a transaction after we just print out all the information. Okay, so now we select 6 for transaction history. This is going to print out our transactions that we have stored in the transactions list. Now we want to make sure that the count is not 0, so we want to make sure that we actually have transactions in the transactions list first before we go printing them out. If it doesn't have anything in there, we're just going to tell the user that there was no transactions to print. We know that we have one, so what we're going to do is iterate through the transactions list, and we will print the transaction at the ith element. So we're only going to loop through this once. We only have the one transaction. That's the end of that loop. So we've looped through that once. Now at this point in time, we have printed out our transactions. So this is transaction number 1, and it tells us what happened. So it was $25 deposited into the account Chris, and it's got the timestamp and everything. Now, before we move on, this little if statement here, the conditions for this is that the count of transactions is greater than 0, sorry. And then it's also going to prompt for rollback. So this is another method. So what we're going to do here is check the number of transactions we have. And if we have one, we're going to offer the user to roll back the transaction. This is the prompt for rollback method here. It'll do a little string check. So it's saying if the input was yes or Y or yes, this is used until lower. So it doesn't matter how the user types it in. For this specific check, if the user provides any answer that's not Y or yes, it's just going to return. So we're looking for a specific answer there. We will say Y for yes. Then going to prompt. We're going to do rollbacks rather to prompt for a number. So we'll print out the transactions list first, the same as we did just before. And then in here, we're going to ask for a transaction number that we'd like to roll back. So for us, the transaction number was 1. It's going to return the count of transactions, which will be 1 as well. Now, here we have the index. So we're searching the list of transactions, looking for the one that we're wanting to reverse or roll back. Because that was initialized as the 0th element, we need to subtract 1 to make sure that that corresponds. So that the user input rather corresponds to the correct element in the list. Now we've selected the transaction here, and we're going to work on rolling it back. So this was what we covered earlier. We're in the bank class again. So this was saying some object of the transaction class. We're passing in a derived object, which is the deposit transaction. And if we hover over here, we can see that. So the object that we've passed in is the one that we just performed. We're going to roll that back. So we're in the deposit transaction class, and we're using the rollback method there. Now it's going to check if the transaction was not executed, and the idea there is if the transaction never occurred, there's nothing to roll back. We know that executed was set to true, so there is something to roll back. We know that it's not reversed yet, so that's false. So we'll move through that and ignore that. And then we'll check if the transaction was successful, which we know it was. Now that we've moved past those, we're going to set reverse to true. We're going to get another date timestamp. We will print some information, just saying that we've rolled the transaction back at this time now. There's some formatting in the way of color and stuff like that there. And then we're going to work on withdrawing the amount from the account. Here we've subtracted the amount from the balance field, the private instance balance field, which I believe is up the top here. Balance there. It's a decimal. And then we'll be able to see in our output here that the transaction was rolled back. So we know that we provided $25 as a deposit. That put our balance up to 225. We've now rolled that back, so the balance is now 200. Just to prove that that sort of worked, we'll go through here again and we'll just print the account that we've been playing with. So that's 3 for print. We'll have to provide a name that will search for the account using the same methods that we've been using previously. So that's get account, stuff like that. It'll return a balance for us. Then we'll be able to see that it worked correctly. Should have printed by now. There we go. So now the account, so the most updated one as of 2/14 is a balance of 200. So we were able to deposit 25 and then roll that back and take 25 back out. Thank you.